I'm afraid we can't process that withdrawal, ma'am. Clients like you tend to raise internal concerns. The words sliced through the air like cold steel. They weren't shouted, yet they landed louder than anything else inside Merritt and Chase Private Banking, one of the most elite financial institutions along the East Coast. The lobby was bathed in natural light from a 30-foot glass atrium, reflecting off curved marble surfaces and hand-stitched leather chairs in mocha tones. The place didn't tolerate noise, didn't rush service, and certainly didn't welcome people like her. Her, meaning Avery Monroe, 48, African-American, standing tall in a beige silk blouse, a soft gray blazer, and sharply tailored black trousers. Just polished enough to pass for upper-middle management, but not quite enough to scream private wealth. From the moment she walked through the revolving glass doors, the temperature seemed to shift. Not literally, but socially. The receptionist glanced up, blinked, then looked back down without the usual greeting. A man in a navy suit waiting by the espresso station glanced at her ID badge, then did a quiet double take. She ignored it. She always did. She wasn't flanked by an assistant. She didn't carry a designer bag. She didn't wave around a titanium Amex. She simply entered, pulled a ticket from the touchscreen kiosk, and waited. Except even that process wasn't smooth. As she tapped her details into the check-in screen, the device lagged, froze, then kicked her back to the start. Welcome to Unveiled Wealth, where every story unmasks what power tries to hide. Behind her, a younger white woman in Lululemon gear tapped in her name and was instantly called to a desk. No one asked Avery if she needed help. When she finally completed her check-in, her number was 38. Number 37 had already been served. She sat one of her turn. 5 minutes passed. Then 10. Number 39 was called next. A man in loafers and a Princeton ring. She approached the receptionist calmly. "Excuse me, my number's 38. It hasn't been called yet." The receptionist, a 20-something with a low ponytail and a face full of indifference, gave her a perfunctory smile. "Oh, that's strange. You're sure you checked in properly?" It was always phrased like that, like user error. Before Avery could answer, a security guard approached. Mid-40s, white trim, name tag said Doug. "Ma'am," he said softly, stepping in too close. "Are you here to meet someone today?" Avery's eyes moved slowly from his name tag to his eyes. "I'm here for a transaction." Doug didn't budge. "I just want to be sure. This is the private wealth division." She let that sentence hang. Let it sit long enough for him to realize how much it revealed. "I'm aware," she said. Doug cleared his throat, nodded, and retreated, hands clasped tightly behind his back. Another woman, blonde, mid-60s, heavy pearls, walked past with a cane. As she passed Avery's seat, she paused for a beat too long and offered a smile that was more curious than kind. "They really should have more comfortable chairs, shouldn't they?" she said. Avery nodded. "They're fine. Sormila. The woman leaned closer, voice lowered. "It's just that some people wait longer than others. Don't take it personally, dear." That word again. Dear? Like a pat on the head. Avery simply smiled. Thin, discerkinon. Professional, dead silent. Finally, number 38 blinked onto the digital screen. She rose, heels quiet but steady, and walked toward window 3 where Cheryl, pale-skinned and pressed, sat behind shatterproof glass. The woman didn't smile. Avery slid her black card and transaction slip through the narrow slot. "I'd like to withdraw $350,000. No excess words, no fidgeting." Cheryl didn't touch the keyboard. Instead, she looked Avery up and down. The bun, the ringless fingers, the neutral nails. Her gaze was clinical, measuring. "That's not a typical request," she finally said. "I called ahead. The funds were cleared this morning. Still no movement. No screen lighting up. No acknowledgement. A pause. Then Cheryl leaned slightly forward. "May I ask the purpose of the withdrawal?" "You may," Avery said. Then nothing. Cheryl blinked. She didn't expect that answer. Behind her in the frosted glass offices, a shadow moved. Enter Harold Levinson, assistant branch manager. He emerged with an iPad in one hand and a smile too polished to be sincere. "Mr. Monroe, is it?" he asked, eyes flicking between her face and her shoes. "Yes. We do have internal controls," he said, the practiced corporate cadence rolling off his tongue, "especially for large cash requests. We reserve the right to delay or deny any transaction that presents operational risk." "Risk," she echoed. "Such as?" He didn't blink. "We've seen attempts to withdraw funds using cards that don't belong to the individual, particularly with newer clients. I've been a client since 2014. Still, the volume, it's just unusual. No, she corrected. It's just unusual when people like me request it. Behind her, someone shifted in their chair. A cough, a foot tapping. Harold's jaw moved once. I'm going to step into the back for a moment. He disappeared. Avery turned back to Cheryl. Cheryl stared. I'll return shortly, Avery said. She gathered her papers, her dignity, and walked. Doors slid open. The light outside felt warmer, less filtered. Her heels struck the tile like punctuation. She didn't get in the waiting car. She stood beside it, back straight, chin up, eyes scanning the top of the building where her name didn't appear. Yet she owned more of it than anyone inside. 15 minutes, Farstronin. That was all she'd need. The hum of the engine outside was gentle, almost too gentle, considering the hostility she'd just endured inside. But this wasn't the first time she had been underestimated, and she doubted it would be the last. Her thoughts drifted slowly to where it all began. Birmingham, Alabama, 1983. The air was thicker there, not just with humidity, but with memory of things that had happened and things people tried to pretend hadn't. It was a city that smiled politely while gripping tightly to the past. And in the middle of it stood a girl who had learned to read silence before she could read street signs. Avery Monroe wasn't born into power. She was born to a seamstress and a Vietnam vet who fixed cars behind a shuttered liquor store. Her mother could measure fabric by fingertip. Her father could hear what was wrong with an engine just by how it coughed in the morning. But neither of them could fix what the world did when it saw their daughter walk into a bank alone. The first time she remembered being underestimated, she was 10. Her mother sent her into a dry cleaner with $5 to pick up 2 dresses. The clerk looked at her, then leaned over the counter and asked, "Where's your mama, sugar?" She hated that word more than any slur. At 16, she started balancing checkbooks for older women in the neighborhood. By 18, she had a ledger of side clients and a growing reputation for being able to speak banker in a zip code that banks ignored. But it wasn't until her 3rd year at Howard University that she realized her talent wasn't just rare, it was dangerous. She'd walked into a downtown Washington bank to cash a scholarship check. The manager took one look, then spent 10 minutes verifying with the issuing institution while whispering to a coworker. Avery stood there, shoes scuffed, blouse thrifted, but her spine straight as ever. When the funds cleared, the manager gave her back the check, then asked without blinking, "Do you want to consider opening a low-fee account instead?" She remembered smiling, then saying, "I want the high-fee one. The one with the concierge and the inheritance trust services." He laughed. She opened it anyway. Avery didn't build a fortune overnight. She started as a risk analyst at a firm where no one looked like her. Not at the front desk, not in the boardroom, not even on the Christmas card. She rose quietly, learned names before they learned hers, memorized floor plans of power. Ninoa Surabernuwan studied how men shook hands, how they paused before saying impressive. By 35, she was chief architect of a risk model that saved a Fortune 100 firm from collapse during a liquidity scare. They gave her a plaque. She sold the patent rights and built a consulting firm instead. By 40, her company had offices in 5 cities. By 42, she held 51% voting control in a holding group that quietly bought into legacy banking structures across the South. Merritt & Chase was one of them. So when Avery stood in that lobby 15 minutes ago, absorbing every micro-cut they offered, each delayed glance, each weaponized question, it wasn't new. It was choreography she knew by heart. And like any seasoned dancer, she knew how to let them perform just enough before cutting the music. 15 minutes. She checked her watch. It was time to go back in. But just before she turned, her mind flashed back one last time to the night she decided she'd never ask for permission again. It was 2006. She was 29, seated across from 3 white men in a walnut-paneled room on the 26th floor of a Manhattan office tower. She was the only woman, the only person of color, the only one without a trust fund or a golf club membership. They were venture capitalists. She was pitching a restructuring model that could save mid-sized banks from the bleeding edge of default post-Essex reforms. Halfway through her presentation, one of the men leaned back, laced his fingers behind his head and said, "You're clearly smart, but you don't look like someone who's ever walked a balance sheet." She remembered the silence that followed, not awkward, not shocked, just complicit. She closed her laptop, stood up, and said, "I walk balance sheets while men like you get lost on elevators." She didn't get their funding. She built it without them. Avery didn't just climb. She tunneled. She mapped blind spots, predicted failure points, and exploited the one thing powerful men always underestimated: quiet. She was never the loudest in the room. She didn't wear power like a costume. She wore it like breath, constant, invisible, essential. She funded startups anonymously, became a shadow partner in fintech firms that now advise the very banks who once denied her. By 44, she owned silent stakes in 4 regional bank boards. And when Merritt & Chase's founding chairman died, she stepped in quietly. No press release, no portrait on the wall. Just voting power, just presence. Her therapist once asked why she never demanded acknowledgement. Avery said, "Because silence forces them to reveal themselves. And I like to know who people are before they know who I am." She still remembered the little moments. Like the time she bought a Porsche in cash and the dealer asked to speak to her husband. Or when she was the keynote speaker at a hedge fund summit and someone mistook her for the catering lead. She never raised her voice. She just remembered and recalibrated the world accordingly. Now, as the sun shifted over the bank's glass facade, Avery's reflection blended with the buildings like a shadow the structure didn't know it cast. She opened her bag. Not for ID, not for her phone, for the folder. Cuartichas 6 for Niumeco. The one with her name printed in firm black ink. The one no one inside was ready to see, because they'd forgotten the most dangerous kind of power. Is the kind you ignore. And that's when the driver stepped forward, phone to his ear. "Ma'am," he said, "the chairman of the board is on the line. He's asking if you'd like him to join you inside." Avery didn't even look. "No," she said, then turned and walked back through the doors. She stepped inside and everything seemed exactly where she'd left it. Furniture, lighting, faces frozen mid-conversation. But the room breathed differently now. But everything about the way it looked at her had, where there was once quiet dismissal, there was now careful recognition. Where there was indifference, there was calculation. Every blink, every shuffle, every breath held a new weight, as if the walls themselves had learned her name. Avery stepped inside like a returning storm, composed, exact, and impossible to ignore. The air inside felt different now, not just to her, but to them. The quiet wasn't calming anymore, it was waiting. The marble floors reflected more than just her silhouette this time. They mirrored the mistake everyone in that room had made. She stepped in like someone who had been here before and would be here again, only now they were seeing her with the right eyes. Not because she changed, but because she made them uncomfortable enough to look closer, and this time they'd have to see all of her. Avery stepped in without pause, her heels clicking softly against the same granite floor that had tried to silence her an hour earlier. The same receptionist sat behind the white quartz counter, but now her back straightened just a little. Her fingers hovered above the keyboard like they suddenly remembered protocol. "Welcome back, ma'am," the receptionist said, not because she meant it, but because something had shifted. Power doesn't always arrive with noise. Sometimes it enters like a draft. Cold, precise, undeniable. Avery didn't respond. She walked past the stares, the whispers, the forced smiles, toward the same window. The same teller. Cheryl blinked. "Oh, Mr. Monroe." Avery held up the folder. "Before you say another word, I suggest you forward this to your branch manager." Cheryl reached forward hesitantly, eyes flicking to the seal stamped on the folder's front. It was subtle, but unmistakable. Board of Governors, Internal Oversight Division. And beneath it, in embossed type, Avery Monroe, Executive Chair. The door to Harold's office opened almost instantly. He stepped out, jacket buttoned, eyes too bright. "Mr. Monroe, I—" "Stop," she said. Calm, level. No heat, which made it worse. He froze. The lobby felt quiet. Even the printer behind the teller line seemed to pause. "Let's move to your office," she continued. "I'd prefer not to conduct board business in the open, but I will if you force my hand." Harold gestured weakly. "Of course." She turned not toward his office, but toward the center of the lobby, where a small crowd had begun to form. "Actually," she said louder now, "perhaps it's better if everyone hears this." She placed the folder on the nearest counter. Loud enough, intentional. A man in a tailored blazer, mid-40s, likely a partner-level client, raised an eyebrow. "Wait, did she say board?" A woman whispered, "That's her. That's the one they were rude to earlier." Harold cleared his throat, attempting control. "Mr. Serpkis, Monroe, if we could please step into my office?" "No," Avery said. "We're past offices." She pulled out another document, handed it to Cheryl. This is a formal audit trigger. Effective immediately, this branch is under review for procedural failure in client handling, misconduct in discretionary rejections, and unauthorized behavioral profiling. Someone gasped. Harold's voice cracked. You can't judge. I can, she cut in. And I have. A man in a blue tie stepped forward. Excuse me, I've been a client here for 19 years. Are you telling me this bank just profiled her and tried to block a legal transaction? Avery looked at him. I'm telling you, they made a habit of it. I was just the first one to write it down. A phone lifted. Someone was recording. Cheryl muttered, This isn't fair. We were just following procedure. Procedure, Avery said, walking slowly toward the teller line, is a shield, not a sword. It's meant to protect both sides, not be used selectively. Harold's hand trembled slightly as he held a paperclip. We didn't know, he began. That's exactly the point, Avery said. You never ask who someone is when you think they're beneath you, but you memorize their names when they rise above you. The air in the room turned thick, heavy with awareness. You judge by the blazer, she said, by the tone of voice, by the color of skin, by the absence of brand names. But you forgot the one thing that matters in this room. She tapped the seal on the folder. I own it. Silence. Then from the side, Doug, the security guard from earlier, spoke. Ma'am, I just wanted to say, I hesitated. And I'm sorry for that. You deserve better. Avery nodded once. Not in forgiveness, in acknowledgement. She turned to Cheryl. You're suspended pending investigation. Then to Harold. And you're relieved of your duties. Effective immediately. An interim branch director is en route. Gasps. More phones lifted. One man clapped. Then another. It wasn't loud, but it didn't need to be, because sometimes accountability isn't explosive. It's surgical. The applause faded, but the silence it left behind wasn't empty. It was tense. Awakened. Watchful. Somewhere behind her, a phone buzzed. A pen dropped. A whisper flickered and died. 10:17 a.m., but Avery didn't hear any of it. She was already walking. Not back to the car, not toward the exit, but deeper inside the building, toward the part of the bank where polished glass gave way to oak panels and names carved in brass. Past the atrium, past the polished smiles, toward the doors that only opened for titles no one dared pronounce out loud. The hallway to the executive wing had always been unnervingly quiet. Soundproofed walls, soft closed doors, and floor sensors that detected footfalls before voices. But today it wasn't the silence that unnerved them. It was her footsteps. Avery's presence arrived seconds before she turned the corner, like pressure building behind a sealed vault. People in suits straightened their collars. A junior executive holding a tablet froze mid-swipe. The bank's regional compliance officer, a man who hadn't made eye contact with her since 2021, suddenly remembered her name. Avery didn't speak. She didn't need to. She walked past the double-glass doors into conference room 7B, the largest one on that floor, reserved only for quarterly reviews, emergency audits, or shareholder wars. Today, it was all three. Inside 7 people. Legal, compliance, regional opinion, interim, risk. And at the head of the table, Cameron Wells, the acting regional director. He stood halfway when she entered, then hesitated, unsure if he should finish the motion. Avery placed the folder down. She didn't sit. This branch is under active audit. The formal review begins now. No one spoke. She opened the folder. Page 1 slid forward, signed by 2 board members and herself. I'll begin with a question, she said, tone even. How many of you were aware of discretionary override codes being used to delay client withdrawals over $100,000 without board review? A silence. Then Cameron cleared his throat. That's handled locally. That's not what the bylaws say. She clicked a remote. A screen lit up behind her. Spreadsheets. Dozens of them. Since January, this branch has used override flags on 137 transactions above $250,000. 89 of them were approved within 8 minutes. She clicked again. 12 were flagged and delayed longer than 20 minutes. Another click. 10 of those 12 had something in common. A chart appeared. Demographics. 10 names. Certain 10 names. 10 faces. All clients of color. The pattern isn't subtle. So I'll ask again. Who authorized the profile flags? No one answered. She let the silence stretch. Not to intimidate, but to reveal. People fill silence with guilt when you give them time. Finally, the legal counsel, a woman in her 50s with silver-rimmed glasses, spoke. We might assumed the local protocols had evolved from outdated practices. No one reviewed the filters. Then you'll all review them now, Avery said. Not at your next staff retreat, not in a private Slack channel. Now, the room stiffened. The man from compliance, James, shifted in his chair. We'll need to verify how long these filters have been in place. You've had 10 years, Avery said, not raising her voice. If you didn't notice them, it's negligence. If you did, it's complicity. Pick one. James froze. Legal spoke again, this time quicker. We'd like to ensure this conversation is properly scoped before it reaches press. Oh, it's already out there, Avery cut in. Clients are talking. Phones are recording. If you're worried about headlines, maybe you should have worried about the policies that wrote them. Cameron swallowed hard. I'll comply, he said. No, Avery said. You'll implement? But Avery didn't leave the room when the session ended. Instead, she sat. One by one, the others filtered out. Some with nods, some with silence. Most with phones already at their ears, reporting what they'd just survived. Only Cameron lingered. His hand brushed the back of a chair, unsure if he should say anything else. He didn't. She didn't look up. A moment passed. Then two dewey or silvernom, one tunon. And finally, when the room was empty, she reached into her bag and pulled out a small notebook. Not digital. Paper, suri ones, worn edges, inked margins. She opened to a page marked with a simple title. Names as Torninanitrachum. Dites. Suri Pitterm. Patterns. The same way they had tracked her in silence all these years, she had tracked them back. It wasn't revenge. She was scarring. It was record keeping. The system had never been broken. It was functioning exactly as designed. She just interrupted the design. A knock at the glass wall interrupted her thoughts. It was Doug, the security guard. He looked nervous, but resolute. Ma'am, he said, voice softer this time. There's someone outside asking for you. Who? Doug swallowed. Her name's Linda. Says she's been coming here for years. Small business owner. Something about a declined loan and a manager who never returned her call. Avery's brow lifted. Doug added she saw what happened. The other clients, they're still outside. Some want to talk. Some just stayed. Avery nodded. She closed the notebook. Send her in. 11:24 a.m. As the door clicked open behind her, Avery didn't rise. Outside, the hum of quiet unrest had turned into something else. Watching, a slow rolling tide of people who realized the rules weren't fixed after all. One voice had cracked the glass. Now others were leaning in to see where the next fracture would appear. Linda stepped in slowly, holding her purse tight against her chest. She wore a navy blouse and jeans with creases from sitting too long. But her eyes, sharp, wet, determined, made the room sit up straighter. She glanced once at Doug, then at Avery. I didn't come to make trouble, she said. But I saw what happened this morning and she hesitated. I think maybe it's time I said something. Avery gestured gently toward a seat. Linda didn't sit. I own a catering business, she continued. Been with this bank for 11 years. Never missed a payment, not once. But when I applied for a business line last year, they told me I didn't qualify. Said my credit history wasn't robust. Wantotomatum. Her voice cracked. But I checked. My numbers were solid. I asked for a reevaluation. No one called back. Not once. Behind her, two other clients had stepped closer to the open door. A man in a courier uniform raised his hand. Same thing happened to me. Twice. Avery looked past Linda to the hallway. 5 more people. Then 9. Then a dozen. No one shouted. No one demanded. They just stood there, bearing witness. Avery turned to Linda. Would you be willing to write it down? What you just told me? Linda nodded. Every word. Avery turned to Doug. Bring them water. And coffee. Chairs if we have them. Then she walked to the center of the open floor and said, loud enough for everyone to hear, this branch is no longer observing. It is listening and recording. If you have a story, you have the floor. No one moved. Then Linda stepped forward and said, I'll go first. Linda stood just inside the door, her hands tight around the strap of a well-worn leather purse. Her body was still, but her eyes moved, taking in the long corridor of polished glass, the hush of security systems humming, the 2 assistants whispering behind the front desk, who immediately looked away when she entered. She wasn't supposed to be here, not in this hallway. Not behind this door. Not speaking to the woman who had just flipped the power structure on its head. Come in, Avery said simply. Linda stepped forward, slow but steady, the way people move in churches or courtrooms. Half reverence, half defiance. I saw what happened in the lobby, she began. I wasn't trying to eavesdrop. I was just waiting. She stopped. Avery didn't interrupt. I've banked here 12 years, Linda continued. My business isn't big. Catering, weddings, retirements, that sort of thing. We needed a credit expansion to hire staff during the summer rush. I applied to Burmester, got no call back. Came in 3 times. They told me someone would follow up. Her lips pressed together, holding back emotion. No one ever did. Avery gestured to a seat. Linda sat down, but only halfway, as if still unsure whether she'd be asked to leave. Behind her, a voice murmured, they did the same to me. A man, tall, one was. Courier uniform. He stayed in the doorway, hands in pockets, gaze steady. They told me I didn't meet their profile for a mortgage. Even though I'd banked here 15 years, 0 debt. They wouldn't even let me speak to underwriting. More footsteps. A woman in scrubs. An older man with a veteran's cap. A teenage girl holding a folder for her mother. All clustered near the door. Avery looked at Doug. Let them in. One. He hesitated for just a moment, then nodded. The glass door slid open. Chairs were pulled. Cups of water passed down a row. It wasn't chaos. It was quiet. Controlled. But pulsing. One by one, they spoke. A black veteran who couldn't get an account switched after his wife passed. A Latina nurse who'd been asked 3 times if her ID was real. An Asian college student who was told to bring a parent to co-sign, even though her income exceeded the threshold. None of them shouted. None of them used big words. But the stories made the air feel heavier. And then Linda, still sitting, asked quietly, what happens now? Avery stood. What happens now is this. We build the paper trail they've spent years avoiding. She opened a folder, pulled out a form with no branding. Just black ink, lined fields, a title, client experience documentation. Each of you who's willing can fill one of these. I'll make sure it reaches the oversight board. No filters, no edits. Tirana Tunir, she looked around the room. And we'll keep records, not just of your stories, but of their response. She paused, because power isn't just what you say. It's what happens after you speak. No one moved at first, but something shifted. The kind of silence that doesn't ask for permission, only presence. Linda picked up the first pen, the weight of it heavier than expected. She looked down at the form, exhaled once, and wrote her name. Not just a signature, a statement. As the ink settled, so did the moment. The room no longer felt like a bank lobby. It felt like a record being written. 11:56 a.m. Downstairs, the first local journalist was being stopped by security. It started with a clip, 6 seconds of Avery Monroe standing still, voice measured, holding a single form. This branch is no longer observing. It is listening. The audio wasn't even clear. The frame was crooked, but the internet didn't care. By noon, it had 34,000 views. By 2:30, it was on 2 local news sites. By 5 p.m., it was stitched into TikToks, spliced into 3 TV segments, and translated into Vietnamese and Spanish. A comment beneath one repost read, she didn't yell. She didn't cry. That's what made it lethal. The hashtags multiplied. Monroe effect, silent banking, dignity is due. Then came the replies. They made me wait 3 days for a check over 10,000. They asked me if I was the assistant. I own the company. My grandmother was escorted out because she looked confused. So, the stories were endless. The patterns unmistakable. By 3 p.m., someone from corporate legal sent a memo titled Urgent Narrative Risk. A separate email thread titled Monroe Containment started at 3:18 p.m., CCing 12 senior executives in one PR firm. None of them had met her. Most had never visited the branch. 3 VPs flew in by 4 p.m., one from diversity and culture, one from strategic risk, one from brand safety. Their suits looked expensive but out of place. Their language, more so. We'd love to center M's. Monroe's voice in our response. Let's get ahead of this before it becomes something bigger. Optics matter here. But outside, optics were already shattered. There were cameras, signs. A former employee giving an on-the-record interview about coded language in branch memos. 2 podcasters live streamed from across the street. A civil rights attorney held office hours in a folding chair on the sidewalk. And then, at 5:42 p.m., a police cruiser parked outside the building. Not sirens, just presence, Avery saw it through the window. She didn't flinch. She walked downstairs through the lobby, through the cluster of mics and bodies, and stood next to the officer. "I assume you're here to protect our clients from retaliation?" she asked. The officer blinked. "We received a call about potential crowding." "There are no threats here," Avery said calmly. "Only truths, and they've waited long enough." Then she turned, back toward the lobby, now filled with clients still writing their experiences on notepads and napkins and the backs of old receipts. In a corner of the lobby, a small flat screen aired a panel on a major news network. The Chiron read, "Bank discrimination? Black female executive sparks reform debate." One guest, a gray-haired former regulator, called Avery overly performative. Another, younger, answered, "Or maybe we're just used to seeing women like her stay quiet." No one changed the channel. Avery walked back through the second-floor hallway, passing corporate's war room. Inside, silence. Aside from the furious tapping of laptop keys. She didn't stop. She didn't slow. Because power was no longer upstairs. It was in the lobby. In the notebooks, discerner renovation, in the hands that finally had something to write on. But not everyone agreed. At 6:42 p.m., Congressman from another state tweeted, "Professional grievance is not the same as systemic injustice. Let's not confuse individual moments with institutional truth." Within 5 minutes, his name was trending below the hashtag silent banking. His mentions flooded with screenshots of similar moments from across the country. One reply simply read, "If you need hundreds of moments to see the pattern, you're not looking. You're excusing." Then came the leak. An internal email thread forwarded anonymously to a local journalist. Subject, brand perimeter strategy. Lines like, "Contain narrative without implicating process, and we recommend not referencing race in official statements," could escalate liability. It was posted publicly within the hour. Corporate PR went into overdrive. Avery watched it unfold from the second floor, one foot in strategy, the other still grounded in the stories below. But what she didn't expect was the knock. A man in his early 30s, neatly dressed, slight tremble in his hand. "I used to work here," he said. Avery looked at him, waited. "I was the one who processed that veteran's denied account switch. The one who spoke earlier. I knew it was wrong. I didn't fight it. I was just trying to keep my job." He didn't ask for forgiveness. He just wanted to be seen. And Avery, despite everything, nodded. Not in approval, in recognition. Then someone from the press called out, "Mr. Monroe, do you believe this branch should be shut down?" Avery turned, looked straight into the lens. "No, she said. "I believe it should be watched." Silence. Then the clicks. Dozens of them. A new headline formed in real time. And just like that, the attention shifted. Not away, but deeper. Toward the questions that had no spin. Toward the systems that were now under a lens. Upstairs, corporate strategists scrambled to regain control. But downstairs, in a lobby once designed to exclude, Avery was already moving again. Not to defend, to decide. Because the next step wouldn't be about headlines. It would be about consequences. At 7:14 p.m., the elevators to the executive level were reactivated. For hours, they'd been idle, quiet symbols of inaction. Now they glowed, dinged. Corona de Fonkenwun moved. Avery was still in the hallway outside conference room 2B when the doors opened and they stepped out. Not the PR team, not legal. The real players. First came Martin Hale, Chief Risk Officer. Gray hair, gray tie, gray temperament. Known internally as the Firewall. Then Alicia Cross, EVP of Strategic Control. Silent, unreadable. Reputation for solving problems without leaving fingerprints. And finally, Jeffrey Marsh, the Vice Chair. Unscheduled, unannounced, unmistakably here to send a message. They didn't shake hands. They didn't smile. "Mrs. Monroe," Marsh said, "we need to speak." Privately, she didn't move. He tried again. "There are governance implications to what's occurred here today." Still, she stood. "I'm aware," Avery said. "That's why I documented everything." Cross stepped forward. "What you're doing, while admirable, poses reputational exposure at scale. For the board, for shareholders, there's a better way to manage this." Avery tilted her head slightly. "You mean quietly?" Cross didn't flinch. "We mean constructively." Avery's voice didn't rise. Constructive would have been giving clients a channel before they had to turn to a hashtag. Marsh cut in. "Let's not get adversarial." Avery looked directly at him. "Let's not pretend this wasn't adversarial long before I spoke." Silence. Then Hale opened a folder. We have a board vote pending to create a temporary executive oversight committee for crisis navigation. You're invited to participate, but we will need you to step back from direct public engagement until internal findings are concluded. Translation. Sit down while we clean up. Avery didn't blink. She stepped forward. I'll review the charter. If it includes client representation and binding policy power, I'll consider it. But I won't be gagged. And I won't disappear. The hallway was still worry. Then a voice from behind them broke it. She's not alone. It was Linda. From the lobby, followed by 4 more clients, then 10, then 15, each holding a signed form, each looking directly at the people who once decided whether they were worth acknowledging. Cross took a slow step forward, carefully choosing each word. Let's not escalate this beyond what's needed. There's a window here, Mrs. Monroe. You can use your influence to shape internal change, or you can burn it on public sentiment that fades in a week. Avery smiled, just barely. You think this fades? Marsh stepped in, arms crossed. Shareholders will not support a prolonged exposure campaign. It becomes an investor relations liability. And that reflects on you now too. She met his stare. Good. Let them know who's been protecting the rot in the walls. Sunlight's free. Let's use it. Hale, quiet until now, cleared his throat. The board can offer a pathway. Limited media, executive council, continuation of your equity position. We draft it right. Everyone walks away clean. You become a symbol. Quietly, Avery's gaze hardened. Symbols don't speak. I do. Zambat. From behind them, the quiet murmur of voices grew. The elevator had opened again. More clients stepped out, some with hesitation, others with certainty. One woman wore her church name tag. Another man held a crumpled overdraft notice with a yellow sticky note still attached. We'll review. Sir. Linda stood taller. We're not here for a symbol. We're here for someone who finally didn't look away. The corporate group turned. They didn't speak because power wasn't in the boardroom. It was filling the hallway, and somewhere behind the group, someone opened their phone and whispered, "She's trending again. International now." Marsh checked his watch. Cross glanced toward Hale. Avery stepped forward, not to confront, but to continue. Because now they would have to follow her. Not because she demanded it, but because the world was watching. 8:06 p.m. The glass doors to the boardroom eased shut behind her. But the next door, downstairs, was already opening. The boardroom was colder than it needed to be. The kind of cold designed to keep people alert, to shorten meetings, to make hesitation feel like wasted time. But Avery didn't hesitate. The table was long, 12 seats, half filled. At the far end sat the chairwoman of the board, Elizabeth Crane. Sharp suit, sharper eyes. She tapped a pen once, then again, but didn't speak. To Avery's left, an empty seat. To her right, a tray with bottled water, untouched. A monitor lit up on the wall. Names appeared remotely. A few cameras on, most off for him. Elizabeth spoke. This is not a disciplinary hearing. This is a procedural evaluation. The events of today have brought us national visibility, policy scrutiny, and shareholder turbulence. We will evaluate whether board leadership has acted within reasonable bounds of fiduciary duty. Avery waited, listened, measured each word like a lawyer cross-examining a whisper. Then she stood. Kilm wasn't matter precise. For 10 years, you asked me to help modernize this system, she said. I delivered growth. I delivered equity strategy. I delivered market stability in Tuknanawanti when 3 of you froze. She paused. But when I used those same tools to expose a rot inside our own walls, when I let clients speak, you started asking if I was dangerous. Elizabeth folded her hands. It's not about danger, Mrs. Monroe. It's about liability. Exactly, Avery replied. So let's talk about it. She tapped her tablet. A file projected onto the screen. Client testimonies. Transaction logs. Disparity heat maps. Policy loopholes. All filed. Time-stamped. Third-party notarized. In review with the Office of the Comptroller as of 7:58 p.m. Someone on the call coughed. Another muted themselves. Elizabeth's pen stopped tapping. Avery held the room with stillness, sharper than any voice could cut. Her tone remained even, but every word carried weight, calibrated like a scalpel, not a sword. This isn't a public relations crisis, she said. It's a systemic reckoning, one that didn't start with a headline, but with people. People treated as anomalies in a system designed to erase them unless they performed. Her eyes scanned the room slowly, not accusing, not pleading, just ensuring they looked back. And now, she continued, you have a choice. If this board votes to silence me tonight, what you're really voting for is the structure that failed them and the silence that protected it. No one responded. Not a shift, not a sigh. The air was thick with calculations and consequence. The vote was called. One by one, the board members gave their answers. 4 votes in favor of Avery's continuation. 3 opposed. No explanation. Just flat tones. 2 abstained, their faces unreadable behind muted camera feeds. And then Elizabeth Crane, the chairwoman, didn't rush. She folded her hands, leaned back slightly, and watched Avery the way a chess player watches a board. Not with hostility, but respect laced with caution. Finally, she spoke. Murray is. Monroe may continue, with full authority over client restoration and structural reform, effective immediately. Avery offered a single nod. No smile. No relief. No performance. Because this wasn't a favor granted. It wasn't grace extended. It was accountability, delivered late, but delivered nonetheless. Outside, clients were still writing. Reporters were still filming. But inside, something had shifted. Because this wasn't just about Avery anymore. It was about what happens when power is forced to answer. Elizabeth sat still, but the room moved around her. People adjusted their posture. Remote tiles blinked on. Silence thickened. The motion passed, but the air didn't ease. Because for once, it wasn't about preserving face. It was about shifting ground. Avery remained standing. There's one more thing. She tapped the tablet again. This time a letter appeared, addressed from clients. Hand signed, a petition formatted like a board memo. We're not just restoring individual accounts, she said. We're codifying client accountability mechanisms, direct feedback integration, public-facing audit dashboards, and we're making it permanent. A director named Langley spoke for the first time. That's not procedure. Avery replied without blinking. That's the point. If someone Elizabeth said nothing. Her eyes scanned the page. Her fingers didn't tap. And then she looked up. Make it binding, she said. Put your name on it. And if it holds, it stands. Avery nodded once. The tablet closed. Outside, the cameras kept rolling, whirring quietly beneath the voices, beneath the headlines they knew were already being written. But inside, the vote had ended. No applause, no dramatic exit. Just decisions made behind closed eyes and clenched hands. It didn't feel like triumph. It felt like structure, steel, recalibrated. Because power doesn't celebrate itself in moments like these. It doesn't cheer. It repositions quietly, permanently. And when it doesn't ask permission. It builds the next room and leaves the door open behind it. It didn't happen all at once. No plaque went up in the lobby. No marketing campaign with Avery's face. No press conference with polished statements. The building remained the same. Same carpet, same chairs, same scent of air-conditioned neutrality. But something had shifted. Clients who once whispered now spoke clearly. Employees who once looked down now looked up. A clipboard sat on the counter near reception. Not for complaints, but for contributions. Each form submitted added weight, not just to policy, but to presence. The presence of people who had long been dismissed by smiles that meant nothing and systems that meant worse. Upstairs, Avery kept her office lights low, not from secrecy, from focus. She met weekly with 3 new advisory members, clients, not executives. Their meetings weren't on the calendar, but their impact was impossible to miss. The overdraft review process changed. The loan pre-screening filters were rewritten. 1 employee transferred to 1 resigned. 2 asked to be trained differently and were. At month's end, Elizabeth Crane released a single-page memo. No header, no PR tone, just 12 words. We don't change by statement. We change by structure. This is that. Discerning is term. By the end of the quarter, client trust surveys rose for the first time in 4 years. But none of that made headlines. What did was a photo. A black woman in a navy blazer, sitting on a lobby bench, handing a pen to an elderly man struggling to sign his name. No caption, just 2 words handwritten on the side of the image. Still here, because the real ending isn't quiet, and it isn't loud. It's when silence finally has nothing left to protect. And sometimes, that's all the permission people were ever waiting for. The new advisory meetings didn't happen in a boardroom. They happened in the community room off the 2nd floor atrium, next to HR across from the break room, within earshot of real people. There was no agenda, just a whiteboard and coffee. Clients spoke plainly about missed callbacks, about invisible barriers, about that look you get when you ask too many questions at the wrong counter. One man, a retired bus driver, said, "You folks think we want favors. We want fairness." That's it. Avery nodded, then wrote it on the board, fairness, underlined twice. One employee, Jordan, returned after taking a leave of absence. He'd been on the teller line the day Avery was dismissed. He asked to speak at a staff-wide session, said he'd grown up thinking neutrality was professionalism, said silence had never felt heavier than it did that day. He asked if he could learn the right thing from the same people the system once overlooked. Avery told him yes, on the condition he bring someone with less seniority next time. That photo? The one of Avery on the bench with the elderly man? It wasn't taken by media. It was snapped by a security guard on his break. He posted it with no caption, but the comments told the story. "My mom cried when she saw this. This is what justice looks like when it doesn't need a podium. Not a revolution, just someone staying long enough to matter." 3 other branches quietly adopted the audit dashboard Avery piloted. Then 8, then 15. No header, no headline, just infrastructure shifting under the surface. One executive anonymously forwarded her notes to the Federal Reserve Compliance Group. He'd never spoken to Avery, but in his message he wrote, "This is how we earn the right to stay in the room." And through it all, Avery never gave a TED Talk, never signed a book deal, never took a consulting fee. She stayed in the building, on the same floor, with the same desk. Because some rooms don't need bigger voices. They need someone who refuses to leave. The first client advisory session happened 3 days after the vote. No catering, no press invite, just folding chairs and a dry erase board. 8 people came. 2 wore uniforms straight from work. One brought her child. Another never spoke, just listened and scribbled notes furiously. Avery arrived late on purpose. She wanted to enter the room after they had started. She sat near the back, listened first, then took 3 pages of notes without lifting her head. When someone asked who she was, she simply said, "I'm here to build with you." And that was enough. 1 week later, a handwritten letter arrived. The paper was floral, the handwriting deliberate. It read, "Dear Ms. Monroe, I'm 78. I've outlived my husband, 3 banks, and my last driver's license. But I haven't outlived bias. They said I needed a younger contact to co-sign a car loan. I walked out. I saw your story. I stayed out. But I just made an appointment with a different branch. Thank you for making quiet count." The letter hung in Avery's office, tucked inside the edge of her bookshelf, visible only if you were paying attention. At a branch in San Jose, a manager named Min implemented the audit dashboard voluntarily. He wasn't ordered. No one tracked it. He simply replicated the framework and trained his team to stop assuming. When asked why, he said, "I don't want to manage bias after it happens. I want to find it before it breathes." Then came a moment no one had prepared for. A woman who had once been denied a business account walked back into the same lobby with a friend, this time as a guarantor. The teller who had once told her, "We'll call you if something changes," now stood up, smiled, and said, "Welcome back. I'm glad you returned." No press was there, no cameras, just memory and grace. And later that evening, Avery stood alone in the lobby. The room was mostly dark, save for the lights above the writing table. Still stocked with forms, still used daily. She didn't touch anything. Just watched. A security guard nodded to her. "Quiet day," he said. She answered, "That means it's working." This was a story from Unveiled Wealth. If it moved you, share it. Because real change isn't declared. It's documented.